Hello everyone, we are Group 2 and our presentation will be on Beyond Enterprise Architecture. We have John, Prakash, Ryan, Raksha, and Hussam. The agenda for this presentation will begin with Chapter 12, Beyond Enterprise Architecture, from the Langhorst textbook. This section will be presented by me, John. Next, Raksha will present on the section about the Extended Enterprise Architecture. Following Raksha, Prakash will present an Agile Enterprise Architecture. After Prakash, Ryan will present an article called Newer Approach to Create Flexible Business Architecture of Modern Enterprise. This article will discuss about modern concepts of enterprise architecture creation that will enable enterprise architecture to become more flexible. Lastly, Hussam will present an article on predictions for enterprise architecture in the year 2020 and how the enterprise architecture is going to evolve to not only include IT sector, but more of the entirety of the business. We begin this presentation with an overview of Chapter 12, Beyond Enterprise Architecture of the Langhorst textbook. Although the term enterprise architecture has become quite common, it has only recently reached a level where it is well understood and practically applicable. Enterprise architecture is very much a holistic approach to the design of organizations. All the different domains in enterprise design meet. However, these individual domains and their interdependencies are complicated. We have to look at this from both a business and a technical perspective. In the past, the Industrial Revolution automated many production activities in companies. There was a shift from blue-collar work to white-collar work. So essentially, they moved from manual labor to more managerial. With white-collar work, you couldn't improve the performance by simply automating it. Improving performance required working smarter by introducing new information technology hand in hand with the new business process ideas. Business processes also need to change due to customer focus. Companies needed to compete, innovate, and expand their customer base. They also needed to meet the demands of their customers. From a technical perspective, modeling and architecture have been in use since the 1960s. The first definition of architecture in the IT world was by Amdahl, Blau, and Brooks in their design of the IBM S360 mainframe. The definition is the term of architecture is used here to describe the attributes of a system as seen by the programmer, i.e. the conceptual structure and the functional behavior, and distinct from the organization of the data flows and controls, the logical design, and the physical implementation. With information modeling, it has been a common practice since the entity relationship diagram, which was developed in the 1970s. Architecture is seen as a tactical instrument for designing an organization's system and processes, and also a strategic tool for enterprise governance. To really profit from the strategic potential of enterprise architecture, an organization needs to optimize the skills, methods, and tools of the architects, and give them the right position in the organization. However, without proper organizational embedding of architectural practice, the enterprise will reap none of its potential benefits. They also struggle with the problem of how close a relationship they should have with business units and system development. Being close is crucial for the detailed understanding, but being too close could be overwhelming for the continuous interaction. Being distant and acting as an external authority allows for a more holistic view of projects, processes, and changes, but could lead to being disconnected and playing a minor role. The acceptance of the role of the enterprise architect depends directly on its perceived added value, which is generally based on shortened development times, reduced overspending, and increased flexibility, but not the diagrams. Lastly, a key element in the recognition of the role of the enterprise architecture is that we should be able to quantify the impact of architecture, both financially as well as in terms of the organizational performance. Being able to quantify the impact of the architecture provides the hard evidence for the value of the enterprise architecture. The extended enterprise is essentially the network of partner relationships beyond the enterprise. In the extended enterprise, the architect role will be both enterprise visionary and enterprise supervisor. The architect will be a linking pin between CIO, CTO, and CEO and the organization. translating strategic choices to tactical decisions and changes, protecting conceptual integrity of the enterprise processes and systems, and guarding the relationship between the enterprise and its environment. The arrival of e-business and e-government has definitely changed the way our organizations and cross-organizational processes function. They introduce a new business models and new ways of thinking. E-business has changed our view of organizations, moving from an enterprise perspective to a network perspective. They are now looking at the whole map rather than just one section. With this, architects now have an increased scope in which the enterprise operates and will need to use different views in their modeling techniques. A specific issue in the design of collaborative networks is that of transparency. An organization needs to make its architecture transparent to its partners to be able to cooperate and comply with various regulations such as Sarbanes-Oxley and the Basel II. Architectures of business networks need to accommodate to conflicting requirements and not disclose business strategies or private customer data. Agile enterprises embrace change as positive force and harness it for the organization's competitive edge. They must deal with rapidly changing environments, adapt their way of working, and increase their capabilities to anticipate and respond to new developments. Models play a prominent role in achieving agility. By using declarative, rule-based, and executable models instead of software codes, systems can be adapted much more quickly, in many cases by business experts instead of software developers. Prakash will present more detail about Agile architecture later in the presentation. The next section will be presented by Raksha on the extended enterprise architecture. Thank you, and please enjoy the rest of our presentation.
Good evening, everyone. This is Raksha. Today I'll be going over the extended enterprise architecture. To give you an overview of what I'll be doing today is that I'll be covering an article by Jab Shekeman, who developed the extended enterprise architecture and the extended enterprise architecture framework in early 2000s. He did this to address the concept of extending an enterprise beyond its organizational boundaries in an increasingly connected world. Shekeman also founded the Institute for Enterprise Architecture Developments for research in enterprise architecture. Currently, all the enterprise architecture frameworks, the extended enterprise architecture maturity model, everything is owned by this organization, that is the IFEAD. Some topics that we'll be covering today are the extended enterprise environment, extended enterprise architecture framework, and the extended enterprise architecture maturity model. To start with, Shekeman says that every organization will have one of the following three value propositions. The first one is when the enterprise owns the customer. A very simple example of this is any organization and their employee. The employee is owned by the organization. The second type of organizational value proposition is when the enterprise owns the content that the customer seeks to acquire. This is clear from any service organization that we see today. If we want to buy groceries, then a retail chain like Walmart has the content that we seek to acquire. The third type of organizational value proposition is when the enterprise owns infrastructure that allows content to be produced or delivered. To continue with the same example of Walmart, when Walmart needs its goods, it goes to its suppliers. So its supplier network owns the infrastructure that allows content to be produced or delivered. In short, every company has a different and a unique business model and value. Now, what happens when a company tries to own it all? Each value proposition guarantees returns, but what happens when you try to own them all? According to Shekeman, in an increasingly connected economy, it does not make much financial sense to own it all. He says that each company has to try and connect to other businesses in order to get the advantages of all the above value propositions. He says that the way an organization tries to avail these services from other businesses around it, the way it does it From that, we can estimate which organization will survive and which won't. And this also creates a need to evaluate how we can best choose possibilities that fit in a technologically connected economy. Now, Schickerman presents the extended enterprise environment. As you can see, according to him, the enterprise is not just itself or its staff or its products. The extended enterprise is comprised of global customers and prospects, partners and investors, mobile people, real-time reporting, enterprise value management, and so on. He says that in an extended enterprise environment, a company tries to capitalize on technology to withstand shocks and to maximize the fit with its environment. In an extended enterprise environment, the company utilizes its adaptiveness to shape and execute real-time strategic operations. The companies who do not upgrade their capabilities will face difficulties in the future, and the cost will continue to rise, and historic knowledge of customers will not hold any value if the companies don't adapt to an extended enterprise environment. For that, he proposes the Extended Enterprise Architecture Framework. Now, the Extended Enterprise Architecture Framework has been developed to meet the existing and future needs of complex enterprise collaboration environments. The E2A framework outlines all the architectural artifacts required, but it must be supported with an effective enterprise program and enterprise architecture in order to be implemented. Now let's have a look at the enterprise architecture framework. This is the Extended Enterprise Architecture Framework. As you can see, it is very similar to the Zachman framework in the sense that it is a 2D grid. It also has similar questions like why, who, what, how, and what and when, with what and when. And it has 4 layers: the business information, information systems, and technology infrastructure. Now, if we see here closely, we can see that each layer tries to answer all these questions. For example, in the business layer, about why should you have an enterprise architecture, it says that it tries to convey the vision, strategy, principles, environment, scope, and contextual level. The first layer has business goals, drivers, concepts, and it includes all these corporate strategic plans and so on. This kind of framework is there for every one of the layers, that is business information, information systems, and technology infrastructure, and at every level, that is contextual level, environment level, conceptual level, logical level, physical level, and transformational level. Now this gives a blueprint of how extended enterprise architecture can be implemented in any organization today. Coming back to our slide here, as we saw, the extended enterprise architecture framework had 4 layers, and Schickerman says that each layer has to be defined at an appropriate level. For example, the business layer definition are defined to the level of detail for which their performance metrics could be evaluated. The information layer has been defined to depict the key information flows and characteristics that can be used to properly align them to overall enterprise architecture. The information systems layer has been defined from the above two definitions, which describe the required functions, features, and standards, whereas the technology infrastructure layer is described as the technological services are provided. Moving on to the extended enterprise architecture maturity model. Now, the extended enterprise architecture maturity model is an implementation plan of the enterprise architecture program. Now, we may ask, what is meant by the enterprise architecture program? The enterprise architecture program enables executives to access centralized, stable, and consistent information. For example, a financial executive might use the enterprise architecture program to pinpoint more lucrative markets and to understand how well an organization is meeting its customers' needs. How can the company better respond to those needs? The Enterprise Architecture program helps companies to better respond to changes in decisions. It helps to reduce duplication and inconsistencies and overall increase the ROI for a company. So this extended enterprise architecture maturity model helps companies to roll out an effective enterprise architecture program. It consists of 4 steps. The first one is to use business behavior instead of business processes. What do you mean by business behavior? Business behavior is defined as ordering of tasks and activities that accomplish business goals. Checkerman says that most companies use business processes to define enterprise architecture, but this will lead to inflexibility. For example, implementing business processes in ERP systems. We've seen time and again that these are rigid and inflexible. The second step is using solution sets instead of information systems itself as part of the extended enterprise architecture framework. Instead of using information systems or applications, we have to refer to solution sets that can be supported by information systems. The third point is about alignment and traceability. This provides a mechanism for mapping business drivers to significant architectural areas that make up the overall enterprise model of future state. The final step is the enterprise architecture framework solution decomposition. Here, the enterprise architecture is decomposed into business solution. To give you an overview, this is how the extended enterprise architecture maturity model looks like. We have several layers here, like the business and technology strategy alignment, extended enterprise involvement, executive management involvement, and different levels of models, that is level 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which starts at no extended enterprise architecture. If we take an example for the executive management involvement at level 0, they say E2A is not for us, we do not need to be involved, we know how to do our job, don't tell me about it. Whereas the level 5 for the same layer looks like the executive management participating in the E2A optimization process. So the extended enterprise architecture maturity model gives a roadmap of how to implement the enterprise architecture framework. We can see that it has several layers here, and this is what is presented by as Sheckman's extended enterprise architecture maturity model. Thank you all.
Hi all, I am Prakash, and in this section I am going to talk about Agile Enterprise Architecture. This slide gives an overview of the topics I am going to cover. I am going to cover what is Agile development, advantages of Agile development, where does Agile development fit in enterprise architecture, advantages of Agile Enterprise Architecture. What is Agile development? Agile software development is a group of software development methods based on iterative and incremental development. It promotes adaptive planning, evolutionary development and delivery, a time-boxed iterative approach, and encourages a rapid and flexible response to change. It is a framework that promotes right iterations throughout the development cycle. It proposes alternative to traditional development approach. Agile approaches are typically used in areas where business needs to respond to unpredictable scenarios. Let's look at some of the advantages of Agile development. Quality. A key principle of Agile development is that testing is integrated throughout the life cycle, enabling regular inspection of the working product as it develops. This allows a product owner to make adjustments if necessary, and it gives product team early sight of any quality issues. Visibility. Agile development principles encourage active user involvement throughout the product's development and provides a very collaborative approach. This provides excellent visibility for key stakeholders, both of the project's progress and of the product itself, which in turn helps to ensure that expectations are effectively managed. Risk management. Small incremental releases made visible to the product owner and product team throughout its development help to identify any issues early and makes it easy to respond to change. The clear visibility in agile development helps to ensure that any necessary decisions can be taken at the earliest possible opportunity. Cost control. Fixed timescales and evolving requirements enables a fixed budget. The scope of the product and its features are variable rather than the cost. Business engagement and customer satisfaction. The active involvement of a user and product owners help to have high visibility of the product and progress, and the flexibility to change when change is needed. Creates much better business engagement and customer satisfaction. Right product. Agile development helps to build the right product. In agile development, the emphasis is absolutely on building the right product. Since this approach is based on incremental approach, deviations can be corrected and right product can be built. Where does agile development fit in the enterprise architecture? So far we have seen what is agile development and its advantages. Now let's see where does agile development fit in the enterprise architecture. On a high level, enterprise architecture is about understanding the current state of organization, identifying the target state, and defining the approach to reach this target state. One of the challenges in the enterprise architecture is developing the required software and tools to meet this goal. This is where agile methodology helps. This slide shows some of the challenges in development of tools for traditional enterprise architecture. Project teams typically don't understand what enterprise architecture does. Project teams don't follow the enterprise architecture. These teams don't work with the enterprise architects, and sometimes they use outdated architecture. This slide shows the advantages of enterprise architecture. Agile enterprise architecture helps to solve the issues we have seen in the previous slide. Agile enterprise architecture has the following characteristics that solves these issues. Simplicity. One of the key aspects is to keep enterprise architecture artifacts simple. It helps to increase the chances that everyone will understand them. Project teams will read the artifacts, and it will be possible to keep them up to date over time. Overly detailed documents might look impressive, but the goal should always be on simple model. Iterative approach. Agile enterprise architects work in an iterative and incremental manner. This approach helps to iterate from one artifact to another artifact when we realize that model we are working on is not the appropriate one to depict a concept. It also helps to create several models in parallel so that it is easy to iterate back and forth between artifacts. Primary focus. Although an important part of the job of an enterprise architecture is modeling and documentation, that should not be a primary focus. Agile enterprise architecture helps to get involved with project teams, to work with them and understand the enterprise architecture and try it out by practice. Bigger picture. Agile enterprise architectures, agile modelers in general, believe in the principle of multiple models and thus strive to look at the bigger picture. They strive to model from several points of view so that their understanding and description of the architecture is more robust. Agile Model Driven Development at the enterprise level. This slide shows the overview of how to take an agile model driven development approach to enterprise architecture. The enterprise architecture team would define the initial architectural vision and models, a process that would likely take several days or even weeks or two. If it takes longer than it indicates a risk of developing architecture model that don't actually reflect something that would work in practice. This approach typically involves envisioning initial architecture, communicating the architecture to stakeholders, updating the architecture work products, and working with developers. At every stage, it is an iterative process. Potential problems with Agile Enterprise Architecture. So far we have seen what Agile Enterprise Architecture is and what are its advantages. This slide shows some of the disadvantages of this approach. It does not include an explicit way to ensure compliance, although having enterprise architects embedded on the teams goes a long way towards this. It depends on people being responsible. It requires to actively strive to keep things simple. It requires to accept an agile approach to modeling and documentation. Thank you.
Hi everyone, the article that I'm presenting is titled Newer Approach to Create Flexible Business Architecture of Modern Enterprise. It was published in December of 2012 in the Global Journal of Flexible Systems Management. The article is basically about enterprise architecture and the shortcomings of it. It looks into theoretical research that other academics have done, as well as created a survey that was presented to numerous businesses in Russia. Okay, and then they give suggestions about how to make our enterprise architecture more flexible and useful for businesses in the future. All of the authors are from Russia, and they have a lot of experience in consulting and educational projects, and some of the problems that they've faced with their customers include impossibility to reflect changes of requirements rendered to business and information systems, fear of losing control over the information systems while the process is optimization, the impossibility to optimize organizational structure without gap in productivity and operability of business structures, high dependence on specific person at a certain place, and high financial risk with changes or modernization of information systems. So the main motivation of doing the research was to basically show the systematic nature of all these problems and to provide a strategic look into the manager's attitudes and their ability to implement changes within the organization, including both in management and the IT areas. They used two different research methods. The first was to conduct a thorough review of the current literature for enterprise architecture that's available today. This is basically a list from the article. It gives the main academic journals that they used and the keywords that they typed in and how many hits came up from those keywords, and then from those how many of those articles they actually reviewed. This is another list of articles that they used, but more non-academic. Okay, their focus was basically to look at the different pitfalls of running enterprise architectures and potential issues that could emerge if they weren't implemented correctly. And from all of these articles, they found that enterprise architecture was mostly criticized for a lack or even absence of stakeholders and business groups involvement caused by rigidity of inner business processes and predetermined nature of the organization. Also, poor alignment of IT and business domains in the organizations that result in emergence of challenges that align business strategy with IT strategy, and to implement effectively strategic change in terms of business agility and time to market. Also, lacking communication between enterprise domains. Following cultural aspects, for instance, organization and political problems that aren't being properly addressed by the current enterprise architecture. And finally, a lack of solid concepts of enterprise architecture addressing complexity and maintenance. They found that most of the literature they came across came up with three major ways to overcome basically the shortfalls of enterprise architecture. The first was to create a common understanding of enterprise architecture. The second was an attempt to adjust the concept of enterprise architecture to practical application and to enable interoperability among various business functions in the organization. And the last was information technologies post-implementation benefits and agility. The authors wanted to supplement the current theoretical research that was available with an analytical survey. So they basically conducted it in Russia. It was a questionnaire that was sent out to several medium to large scale businesses. There were 65 responses from 51 business units of 20 groups of companies. And the questionnaire consisted of 5 main groups of questions. This is a graph from the article, and it basically shows the responses, 0 being non-existent and 5 being a very positive response. It gives you the average and the mode of the responses. So they took 8 areas, and you can see basically almost everything is about a 3, except for functional completeness scored a little higher at a 4. The authors noted that these responses were significantly higher than what they anticipated, but that also the group of respondents was fairly small, so it can't really be representative of all businesses. The authors came up with a list of what they call 5 paradigms of business model development, and these are basically 5 major developments that are important to business today. First is BSM, which is Business Service Management, and BPM, Business Process Management, SBPM, Subject Oriented Business Process Management, BPO is Business Process Outsourcing, and ICS is iCloud Services. Okay, BSM basically has to do with managerial decisions for an enterprise, such as make or buy decision. BPM knowledge area is the question of process modeling and optimization. SBPM is more focused on a certain area within the business. Okay, BPO deals with nearshoring and offshoring of secondary business functions and processes. And finally, the ICS makes a number of new business models possible that have to be flexible in order to respond quickly to changing circumstances and to adapt to the business model. And from the research, it showed that there's no group of respondents that adopted all of the approaches completely, but the average adoption of the paradigms was unexpectedly high. Okay, then the authors basically list 3 major areas of possible innovation within enterprise architecture. The first is with business service design, next is business service outsourcing, and then finally service-oriented architecture. So for business services design, it basically represents executives and managers' viewpoints. So it provides a basis for more detailed designs and other organizational planning. Information, application, security, privacy, policy and rules, and also technology architectures each contribute to the design of the required IT solution. This design is focused more on business process modeling and management. Okay, for business service outsourcing, the researchers claim that the outsourcing models will be flexible in order to respond quickly to changing circumstances and to adapt the business model if necessary. They state that cloud services via the internet could make a number of new business models possible that give extra outsourcing opportunities. So by storing services using cloud computing, it'll be possible for enterprise customers or inner clients to exploit the services. And finally, for service-oriented architecture, basically any business function can be realized as a set of services in the private corporate IT infrastructure and in cloud environment. So it basically focuses on businesses becoming more service-oriented and how our enterprise architecture needs to follow suit. And finally, the authors state that by combining all of these areas of possible innovation and existing understanding of enterprise architecture requirements, they anticipate movement of enterprise architecture to a real-time business architecture that will become more flat and market adaptive and could quicker be transformed according to business requirements.
Thank you, John, Raksha, Prakash, and Ryan. Hi everyone, my name is Hussam Yusuf. I'll be talking to you about the predictions or roadmaps of enterprise architecture in 2020. So just a little background about the author and the article. The article is Prediction Enterprise Architecture in 2020 by Mike Walker. He presented this article at the TROX Worldwide Enterprise Architecture Conference. The author thinks that there are two very distinct perspectives from people that he talks to about enterprise architecture. The first group are the people that do not understand the value proposition of enterprise architecture and feel that it will be abandoned as a discipline soon. The second group of people see wild enthusiasm and grand predictions on how enterprise architecture will change the world. The author thinks that enterprise architecture is here to stay, and he believes that it will look a bit different than it does today. Enterprise architecture will evolve to its eventual state. Many of the existing functions that enterprise architecture performs today will be here. However, there will be a pruning of the functions that do not make sense and additions to what does. The core charter will stay the same. Predictions for the year 2020. The author believes that the following will be the key changes to enterprise architecture. Again, this is his vision and his view. It could be more than these, but from this article, these are the 4 predictions that he believes it will happen in the future for enterprise architecture. The first one is clear purpose. Understand and operationalize enterprise business. Enterprise architecture activities. Enterprise architects' competencies and certification. Clear purpose. Enterprise architecture has been a collection of many things without a perfect, clear, consistent, and universally accepted purpose, definition, and set of outcomes. So you may think, why is all of this important? Well, from an overall industry perspective, it is essential to have the purpose and clarity to have sustainability as a profession. This will allow for common expectations from professionals that make up the enterprise industry. Without purpose for individual enterprise architecture team within companies, it can also be problematic. With loose or even random value proposition, it will hinder credibility and ultimately results. So by 2020 and beyond, the enterprise architecture industry will have a clear vision and generally accepted answer on the purpose of enterprise architecture. We see example of this every day with the university's support, firmer standards, maturing enterprise architecture functions, and wealth of support from practitioners in communities like LinkedIn and others alike. Understand and operationalize enterprise architecture. Business. Today, the business of enterprise architecture is not clearly understood. By 2020, the industry should have matured much in this area with a revised focus on business acumen versus purely on technical architecture. We are already starting to see operational and services excellence in enterprise architecture teams. This trend will continue. As we begin to interact more and more directly with the business, they are going to want predictable and repeatable results. To do this, service enablement is needed to have clear SLAs and OLAs. With this new focus and purpose, how enterprise architect architecture operates will be different. Enterprise architecture, operating, and service model will aid in repeatable and predictable results for its customers. Enterprise architecture activities. With a business-centric enterprise architecture organization, the first priority should be to focus on value management. Enterprise architecture in 2020 will think first about what value is to be derived from a potential solution to a problem. Value can be many things. It depends on the customer and the business, and it could be cost reduction, productivity, or risk reduction. By focusing on portfolios of capabilities, the enterprise architect will be able to manage value in a quantitative and qualitative way. This will also aid the enterprise architect on focusing on what investments are important at any given time to allow for maximum returns for the business. So now we'll talk about the enterprise architect's competencies and certifications. Enterprise architects are being asked not only to align but to partner with the business, meaning understanding the business. To do this, they need the competencies and skills to be able to act and speak accordingly with the business. This space is advancing year over year. The author of this article built a framework that illustrates the separation of the different industry certification. So the first industry certification is competency-based certification. These certifications are focused at evaluating your experience with to validate that you are indeed an architect, much like many other certifications in the industry such as PMP. These are much different to others that determine what you know instead of how you applied the knowledge. Second, industry specialized certification. Driven from a predetermined set of concerns, such as the federal government or a specific industry, is where these drive from. While these certifications are critical in that vertical, oftentimes they do not transfer well across verticals given the difference in drivers and motivations of these very specific bodies of knowledge. Third, foundational certification. Foundational certifications provide the essential skills for enterprise architects. These certifications are different from the other two in the respect that they validate that you are an architect, while foundational certifications validate that you know a specific method or tool. Fourth, supporting certifications and learning. These certifications make a well-rounded enterprise architect. These are often referred to or leveraged in the life of an architect. And that is the end of this article. If you have any questions, please post them on the discussion board. And thank you very much.